being able to plug into the community, not just in a way where they get links about things that are relevant to the day-to-day job, but they're getting, even if it's a one-sided conversation in a newsletter, for example, some kind of conversational interaction with people who are also in the community. And a conversation is never just, let me list for you the set of resources that are interesting. A conversation includes, this is what I think is most important, these are trends I'm seeing, all that kind of stuff. And so to be able to offer that to people was, people have found that more valuable than I originally anticipated or expected.
Hey everyone, I'm Joel Premack, host of the Community-Led Growth Show. Today I'm joined by Seth Wylie, Director of Customer Success Operations and Admin Community at Gainsight. Thank you so much for being on the show today, Seth.
Thrilled to be here, Joel. Thanks for having a chat with me.
Of course. So, starting off the conversation, would you please give everyone a quick 30-second intro about yourself?
Sure. So I'm constantly reinventing exactly how to introduce myself. My latest flavor is that the thing that I most love to do is to help groups of people reach an aha moment. And so that's looked like several different things over the past, almost 20 years of my career. The most recent roles I've been in, that has looked like running customer success operations, because a big part of that is helping leaders to step back from their day-to-day and figure out what is going on in our world of CS. What do we want to improve and how do we do that? And then most recently, for the last year and a half, working in this community management role, that has looked like, how do I create spaces for people to feel comfortable being open with each other about the problems they're facing and solving problems together. And then through several previous roles, management is also very much part of that. How do you help your employees have a sort of aha moment as part of their coaching conversations with you? So that's the thread that ties things through, but I'm super excited to be in a community management role where I'm sort of creating these environments where people hopefully get to have aha moments every day.
I first love that, and two, perfect segue into the next question that I was going to ask. So, what was it like transitioning from being a customer success operations professional to now building a community for customer success operations professionals?
Yeah, so let me give a little bit of context about the sort of flavors of CS Ops that I'd experienced, because that ties into what it looked like to start up that community. Firstly, my first role in CS Ops was at a startup of 150 people or so. I was the only CS Ops person. I was our Gainsight administrator when we purchased Gainsight, and I built it out for a year and a half or so. So I have experience of CS Ops in that sort of individual contributor, deep in the tech, figuring out the data, all that kind of stuff. Then I came to work at Gainsight in a CS Ops sort of senior level individual contributor role. So then I had this experience of working in CS Ops as a cross-functional project or program manager, wrangling, herding a lot of cats, trying to get alignment between people who usually didn't spend a lot of time in meetings together, those kinds of things. Then I managed our CS Ops team at Gainsight. So managing a team, being head of CS Ops, not as an individual contributor, but as a manager. So all these different flavors, when I switched into this role of how do I create a community for CS Ops, help me to understand the different types of questions and challenges that are on the mind of a CS Ops person when they come to a meetup or when they leave a conversation with someone, a networking conversation or what have you, where they go back to their desk and they're like, I have like 3 ideas I want to try right away. And I'm also just so glad that I got a chance to meet this person. So I had that sort of specific understanding of what people in CS Ops were facing. And I feel like a lot of people, when they start a community or when they are a community manager who steps into an existing community, so much of what they're doing in the first, several months at least, is really understanding the persona. Who are these people? What do they need from their community? All that kind of stuff. I got to skip that. I got to go straight into full geek up mode, where it's like, I like talking about this stuff. I like talking to people about it and helping them understand it themselves. So I got to go straight into that mode without actually having to do the CS Ops myself anymore, because that management of that CS Ops team was then handed off. But on the flip side, I had to do a lot of learning about community management. I had a lot of transferable skills from being a people manager and helping to understanding how to help establish psychological safety amongst team members so they can really chat with each other in an open way. And I had a lot of ideas about exactly how to transfer that into a community management space. I'd also facilitated workshops and all kinds of things. Where I'd had a chance to work on pieces of community management, but after stepping into that role, I threw myself into reading books, listening to podcasts, finding the right Slack communities to join, all that kind of stuff to make sure that I was coming up to speed on the best practices on the community management side. So those are a few main pieces of the puzzle.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing those with us. And now we're going to take kind of like a different turn because I think it's really interesting how you've made this transition successfully from being a SME operator into now being a community professional for that like realm in which you were an operator as.
Mm-hmm.
So, what are some of those traits that you think that SMEs may have that then can create like a strong foundation for essentially doing what you did of transitioning from operator in a role to now building a community for that role and that profession?
Mm-hmm. So the reason that the role sort of opened for me, this community management role, was two things. Well, three, maybe four things. I don't know. Several things happened at once. One of them was that the Gainsight admin community, which is a subset of the broader CSOps community, they started their own meetups and their own Slack space. And so it was really easy for our senior leadership to say, wow, there's so much energy here. How do we make the most of this? So there was this sort of grassroots enthusiasm that leadership very readily saw, all the way, CEO like leading the charge on the enthusiasm for that. At the same time, unbeknownst to me, the machinations were happening around Gainsight's acquisition of Insighted. So the company as a whole was leaning into community management. Third thing, I had told my boss and my boss's boss and my boss's boss's boss, who was the CEO, that I was looking for a role where I got to spend more time doing this kind of creating spaces for people to connect with each other and have aha moments together. So those things all converged into creating the role. And there were a few things that were important about who I was and what I was bringing to the table that made me the right person for that role. One of them was certainly my knowledge and expertise in the area of the community that I was going to be focused on. Another was that I'd had a chance to work cross-functionally a bunch and have visibility up and down the hierarchy. And that was important because it made people, notice that I was there and available for this. It also was a chance to build trust with so many stakeholders, including the CEO, that I was able to step into owning a program. And owning a program that in this case was starting largely from scratch, at least as far as Gainsight sort of actively managing this community of CSOps people. That trust was important for them to be able to flag like, hey, Seth, I feel like you'd be good at this. And then something else that ties into that is the fact that they knew I was looking for something where this was a fit. So that ability to see the kind of work that you like to do and being able to articulate that to people, that was a key part of it. Then two last things I want to mention. One, another sort of critical trait here is that I didn't just like doing the work, I also liked connecting with people about the work. That like loving to geek out about how are we doing this thing? What are the best practices? All that kind of conversation. I was as much motivated by that as I was by doing the actual work. I was like curious about like, what are the systems? Like what does it look like to do CSOps well? I was very curious about that. And so that's critical in someone who's going to be managing a community for those people. And the last thing I want to point out was this, the degree to which I had thrown myself into our management training, which is called Human First Leadership. purpose of Gainsight, the stated purpose is to be living proof that we can win in business while being human first. So that's why our leadership program is called Human First Leadership. And I went through the program. I then got trained to deliver it. And I've sort of been an advocate for it within Gainsight for a number of years now. That gave me a great deal of skills that I sort of alluded to earlier about a lot of skills that are very helpful for nurturing a group of people to help them have conversations, facilitate those conversations, do it in a way that's not just, I'm going to post some sort of robotic discussion question and see if I can get people to like it and post it, but really about generating honest interaction. So that sort of combination of knowledge in the thing, liking to talk about the thing, proving that I can bring people together to work on the thing cross-functionally within the company, and that interest in bringing people together and facilitating a conversation, that sort of special sauce, at least for me, was really important to setting me up to be exactly the kind of person to make a transition from subject matter expert to community manager for that subject.
Awesome. So now I'm just really curious, what's been one of your like biggest aha moments or like topics that you've gotten to geek out since making this transition now?
Mm. Oh my gosh, so many. It's sort of like if you were to ask that question each month as I've gone along, it would be different. Let me flag a couple. One of them was the degree to which community members value the perspective of someone who is willing to sort of process all the information that's out there. So one of the big things I did as part of my CSOps community was stand up a monthly-ish newsletter for CSOps folks and people who are curious about CSOps. And that started, it started as basically like a way for me to share the registration links from meetups. Then that grew into sort of a compilation of different meetups. And then I started adding other links and resources that were new. And then more recently, I've started to add sort of commentary to it about like what I'm seeing in the CSOps market. And it's just my commentary. It's just, the perspective of one person. But for people who are otherwise, isolated, and a lot of folks like Gainsight admins, for example, are the only Gainsight administrator in their company. They're so isolated. That sense that being able to plug into the community, not just in a way where they get links about things that are relevant to the day-to-day job, but they're getting, even if it's a one-sided conversation in a newsletter, for example, some kind of conversational interaction with people who are also in the community. And a conversation is never just, let me list for you the set of resources that are interesting. A conversation includes, this is what I think is most important, these are trends I'm seeing, all that kind of stuff. And so to be able to offer that to people was, people have found that more valuable than I originally anticipated or expected. So that's one aha moment that I'm leaning into. Another is so my role has grown from being focused just on CSOps and admin community, still a huge part of my role, but now I have a couple of community managers reporting to me because the work that we do on community at Gainsight is broader than just CSOps and admins. And we have our official community that's hosted on the Insighted platform, that's at community.gainsight.com. The community manager in charge of that now reports to me. And so we have a lot of different personas and types of conversations and so on that we're serving. And as part of broadening my focus into all the different realms of community, or many of the different realms of community that Gainsight works on, I've come to understand this distinction between creating the spaces where conversation can happen, which is where my original focus was, versus sort of the individual programs for which you use that. So helping people to find Gainsight admin jobs and the career advancement as a Gainsight admin. That's one type of program. Another type of program would be helping people to understand what does scalable digital-led customer success look like? Totally different focus and has different business outcomes for Gainsight, but another thing where community can be really helpful. So the other sort of, so the second of third things I'm thinking about is this programmatic aspect. What are we turning the sort of fire hose, but in a healthy way, of community on? What are we turning it on to improve for our business? And then thirdly, the sort of foundation of the community as a vibrant, active place where people are nurtured through their journey as a participant, and they get the rewards and recognition for participation and all of that, sort of just nurturing this as a healthy space. I've come to a much more rich understanding of those things, as those three things, as interconnected, but also independent. And that allows me to think about where should we be putting all of our energy, or how should we balance our energy? I started out with full balance towards how do I create comfortable and safe communication spaces. Then it shifted pretty substantially towards focusing on the CS ops and admin content and conversations for that area of the community. And now I'm coming to a more sort of holistic understanding of how these things all need to be in balance with each other in order to make a vibrant community space that has output for the business, and also feels like home to the people who are interacting there. Sorry, that was a very long answer, but that's a pile of thoughts.
No, oh my gosh, please do not apologize. It was amazing. I was just like, yes, 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 love that. Yes, keep going, please. Like, if we could have just done a whole episode on that, I think we could have. But sadly, we are also going to touch on a few other things during
Sure.
our discussion today. So now that we've talked about your transition into being a community professional now for the CS Ops community at Gainsight, what is like the full scope or breadth of community for CS Ops professionals? And also, what's the value? I know you kind of touched on this a second ago, but if there are any other value points of these efforts to Gainsight?
Yeah. So let me start with my sort of beachhead of how I entered into the community space, and I'll expand it from there. So in the CS ops world, because I had the advantage to focus for basically a full year on just CS ops community, I was able to build a really rich understanding of what it looks like for someone to get value out of that community space, the kind of content they're looking for, what it looks like for them, excuse me, to advance their career, and the kind of resources they need for that. So essentially what I built out is, what does the career journey of a Gainsight administrator or a CS ops person look like? Starting all the way at that point where they're just hearing about it for the first time. Maybe they don't even work in tech, they don't work in customer success. They're just sort of thinking about, how do I get into tech? Like, oh, there's this Gainsight admin role. What does that involve? I've never had a technical role. Could I even do this? That's the beginning of the journey, and then it ends all the way at sort of leveling up into director level roles where you're covering operations for multiple customer facing departments and all the steps in between. So one way that I think about it is, what are the journeys that people are traveling, either as our customer or just in their career as a persona that's really important to us as a vendor, and what are the kinds of resources that they need to move through those different stages. So if I have a really good understanding of what that journey looks like, then I can start to create metrics around whether that thing is delivering value. So that could be, we create a really important resource for someone who's early in their journey. We get to track how much is that resource being used, whether it's someone reading the PDF or showing up at the round table and taking part in the conversation or going to our conference or whatever it might be. Those resources, if we've tied it to a certain stage of the journey, we can see if people are using them. Then we can use surveys and potentially some other metrics, depending on the nuances of the specific thing we're talking about, to track whether it seems like they're actually getting value out of that. So that's how it was. That's where my focus has been in the CS ops community and Gainsight admin community. Then, if we zoom out a little bit, there's our broader community at community.gainsight.com, which has a lot of Gainsight admins and CS ops people participating there. A lot of providing of product feature feedback and participating in beta programs and so on, but also conversations about customer success in general and everything in between, and conversations about product management, thanks to our Gainsight PX product, which is for product managers and for customer success teams. And that therefore means that we are focused on, what are the kinds of engagement metrics there and what value people are getting out of that community. And then we can zoom even further out and we start to encompass areas of community work at Gainsight that, where my team is involved but don't run everything. So for example, people going through our certification program for Gainsight admins, how are they connecting with each other and helping each other get, study for the exams? Or people coming to our conference. Absolutely a community moment. How do we help people engage while they're there? Roundtables that are run by my team and our digital ed success team and our office of the CEO, and there's just roundtables all over the place for networking within the customer success space. There are these beta programs I mentioned run by our product team. So there's such a broad swath of programs that are owned by many different teams. Marketing owns all our field events, for example, pizza parties, or people in, certain markets can get together and, customers meet prospects and so on. So many different types of community that are happening that a big part of my job is just staying up to date with just making sure I feel like I'm plugged into what is going on out there. So I can say like, oh, did you know that this person is doing this thing? You should know about it, all that kind of stuff. So I feel very blessed to be in a company where there are so many teams that see value in community in their own way, and they are working on community in their own way. And each of those teams is measuring things different. Those pizza party meetups are measured in, leads generated and conversions to opportunities and that kind of stuff. That's not something I need to pay attention to, but something I do need to pay attention to is, are there people in those markets who should absolutely be invited to those, or people who should absolutely know about them? Should I include some of these meetups in my newsletter, even though I'm not organizing them? So that sort of federated approach to community across the business has helped each area of the business to build the type of community that's right for them. And I think we're just reaching the point as an organization where we are starting to have a more holistic understanding of all the community things we're doing, the values that are shared across all those different community spaces. For example, all of them feeling sort of safe and accessible, an example of one type of value. Certainly our childlike joy, that's one of our company values that we try to infuse into everything that we do, from one-on-one meetings up to major conferences. So let's see, where was I going with all of this? In terms of showing the value, each area of the organization shows its value in its own way. I'm focused on showing the value in the context of the journeys that I feel like we are particularly focused on right now, and supplementing that with metrics that are about just showing that we have an active community space that's available for whatever direction we want to point the fire hose.
Awesome. I love that. And I think it's really interesting how you just touch on and essentially like walked us through the way that community at Gainsight may look different to different people and like teams within Gainsight, but there are these core and common threads among them all, and each one ties into like their respective business outcomes, but it's still, there's always an element of like being helpful to attendees or those who are in the space as one of those common threads. And I love that. So thank you so much for sharing that with us.
Absolutely.
So last question, and I'm so excited to hear your thoughts on this, are what are 3 B2B SaaS community trends you're watching out for in 2023 and beyond?
So I think that, especially because of the pandemic, people really miss, or entirely because of the pandemic, people really miss being in spaces where they do feel like they have a genuine connection with people. So one thing I'm looking out for is, what are all the ways that community teams are helping people to feel that they have a personal connection with other people in the community? That often looks like something like Meetsy, these programs for networking. I participated in one of them, and it's on and off, depending on whether I click the link or not. And so I feel like it doesn't, Meetsy doesn't solve all the problems, but or doesn't, fully solve all of the need that's out there, address all the need that's out there. But I'm curious for how creative people get about helping people to have that human connection, because at the end of the day, it's just nice to talk with someone who understands the thing that you understand, who has the same vocabulary, and there's so much value in that. I feel like you leave those conversations, even if you don't leave with tactical ideas for what to do, you leave with a fresh sense of motivation and drive, and you can't put too high a price on that. So anyways, that's one thing I'm looking out for. Another thing I'm looking out for, and this goes a bit to that sort of cross-functional way we approach community at Gainsight, is all the different ways that different aspects of different areas of the business can have give and take with the community areas that exist. What are the right ways for me to be plugged into these meetup areas? What are the right kinds of things for my team to manage at our conference, meetups and so on at the conference? Are there some things that if my team were involved would change how the conference was structured, or change how the pizza party was run so that people felt more comfortable, or they felt like they could continue the conversation online afterwards, or whatever it might be? So the sort of back and forth, give and take with community for all the different people who have some way in which they participate, and for the people who haven't figured out how to participate yet and what that looks like for them. I'm just looking out for what are all the ways that an entire business wraps itself around the idea of engaging with the community, as opposed to the employees are doing the things the employees do, and there's one team that interacts with the community and everything channels through them. That's the world I think we're getting away from. And then the third thing it sort of ties with the previous two. Given that we've all become so much more accustomed to interacting with people virtually, how does that help us do this better, do all this connecting and cross-functional work better than we ever could have before? Because we have not just live meetups, but also so many other repertoires at our disposal. Me and my group of friends, or some of our closest friends, my husband and I, we're still doing Friday afternoon quarantinees hangouts on Zoom, which is bonkers because it's October of 2022 now, and we're still doing that. And not everyone comes every week and yada yada. But there was a time where showing up on Zoom to hang out and chat is something people are like, wait, you want to do it on Zoom? That's so awkward and weird. That's now so within our realm of normal that I feel like it just opens entirely new possibilities to us that allow us to connect with people who we never could have considered connecting with before. And so I feel like it's as much about creating online meetups as it is even more so about finding people to connect with who we never realized were within the realm of people we could actively work on something with. Based across the country or around the world. So I'm just very curious for what this all looks like when more people feel like community is accessible to them. Maybe that's the theme of my 3 points, is when human connection is accessible to you and not just the province of one particular team, what does that open for you as a professional? What does that open for you as an organization?
I love that. I love all those. Wow. And it's so cool to hear how you all are still doing those Friday Zoom calls. And I hope you all continue them, because it sounds like a great way to build up those relationships, even if someone's traveling or time zones don't always work and such based on
Mm-hmm.
wherever they are. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
glad to hear that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So Seth, again, thank you so much for being on the Community-Led Growth Show today. If people want to connect or follow you, what are their best channels and our handles for them to use?
Yeah. So certainly find me on LinkedIn. Happy to connect with folks there. I'm also very active on the on community.gainsight.com, at the Gainsight admin Slack channel, very active on that, and the numerous other CS Ops and Ops Slack channels. You'll probably find me in any of those that you might join as well. So whatever channel it looks like, looking forward to seeing people out there.
Awesome. Thank you so much and have a great day.
Thanks so much, Joel.